Hi everybody! So today I'm going to be talking about autism and how it affects me personally. There's a phrase in the autism community, and that is, if you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. And that is very true, because sometimes you can say, oh, if you've met one person, you've met them all. But that's not the way it is with autism, because it is a spectrum. And by spectrum, it does not mean it's just linear and there's one end and another end. There's not high functioning and low functioning spectrum. It's a spectrum more like a circle where there's a bunch of different things. Like you might have struggles over here but be okay over here, or maybe you're okay over here and have struggles over here. And it's just very different for every person. So I'm going to just explain a little bit about how it affects me and what I've done to cope and how I've learned and what my life's kind of been like as an autistic girl. Autism is actually manifests differently in boys and girls, which is why a lot of autistic boys are often diagnosed earlier and more often, just because boys manifest a lot more outwardly than girls usually. So girls are usually more inward with their symptoms, usually more just better at masking, which is pretending to be normal, basically. They're good at like copycatting their friends and like copycatting behaviors that make them appear to be not autistic. And so girls have a lot harder time getting diagnosed just because they manifest symptoms differently. I wasn't diagnosed until I was 15 or 16-ish. I don't recall exactly, but I was a teenager when I was diagnosed. A lot of autistic women aren't diagnosed until they're adults, or maybe even aren't diagnosed at all, because, like I said, autism manifests so differently in girls than it does in boys. So from the time I was very, very young, there was always something that was different about me. When I was an infant, my mom said that I would just cry inconsolably, that I was a very fussy baby, and she had a very hard time with me. I was her second child, and so she was still kind of learning things, and I would just cry and cry and cry, and the only thing that could help me was my grandma. And looking back, we figured out why. It was because my grandma would swaddle me in a blanket very tightly, and she would rock me. And so that tight swaddling and that rocking was very soothing to me and to my sensory, and so that would help me calm down. So looking back, we were able to see, oh, that was probably the autism and having the sensory processing issues. So when I was a toddler, from about age 3 or 4 to about age 12 or 13, I had very outward meltdowns. And again, at the time, we didn't know that I was autistic until lots later. So I would just cry. I would just cry and cry and cry, and it was loud crying. It wasn't like inward crying. It was like, ah, and just screaming and just being so loud and obnoxious. And heaven help my parents. I'm so glad they didn't like beat me. They never laid a hand on me, which is incredible to me. They would just put me in my bedroom and close the door and just let me cry it out. And it would go on for hours and hours and hours. I would just cry and scream and cry and rah and just everywhere. And so they just thought I was throwing tantrums and that I was a very stubborn tantrum child. And I was very stubborn as a child. But looking back, we realized that those were not tantrums. They were actually meltdowns. I can remember when I was having those experiences that the only thought in my head was, I want mom to come and give me a big hug and help me feel better. But I didn't know how to express that verbally. And so I would just scream and cry because that's the only thing I knew how to do that would hopefully get me help. But it took me many years to realize that that did not get me help. So like I said, from 3 or 4 to about 12 or 13, I would just have these screaming, crying, tantrum meltdowns. And they were horrible. And looking back, we realized they were meltdowns and not tantrums. And so, like I said, I don't blame my parents for what they did, because they did the best they could with the knowledge that they had. They didn't know I was autistic. If they did, things might have gone differently, but that's just the way it was. So when I finally figured out that the crying, screaming wasn't doing any good for me, I just started kind of having shutdown meltdowns, which is kind of what I have now, but a little bit different. So when I was younger, like 14, 15, I started having the shutdown meltdowns where I would just shut down. I would just go into myself. I wouldn't talk to anybody. I wouldn't respond to anybody. I just would shut down. I'd be like a zombie mode person, just completely in myself. And that's kind of the way my meltdowns are now. But now at this point, it's kind of just hyperventilating and rocking and just crying unconsolably, but it's not like outward screaming crying, it's just like sobbing. And that's my meltdowns now. And during my meltdowns, I have really like negative thoughts, and I know these thoughts aren't myself. I know that it's just the meltdown, but it's really sucky. And when I'm done with the meltdown, if I don't have help with it or with recovery, I just feel really drained, just emotionally and physically. It's not fun. Autistic people don't like having meltdowns. So that was my childhood. When I got to middle school and high school, I had a really hard time because I'm certain that I was bullied, but I didn't recognize it because I just didn't really care what other people thought of me. But I had like no friends. I had one good friend that I had from church, and that's the only reason she was my friend, was because I knew her from church. And so we just were buddy and we hang out together and we were just best friends. And then she found a new best friend in middle school, which that happens. Girls have more than one friend, right? And so she started hanging out with this other friend and kind of stopped hanging out with me. And I don't blame her for that. That's a girl thing. That's what they do. But because of that, I no longer had any friends and I was by myself. And that was the most terrifying thing to me. And I just kind of shut down and I just wasn't very social and I was very depressed. I was diagnosed with depression before I was diagnosed autistic. But we figured out the reason I was depressed was because I didn't know that I was autistic. Didn't know why I couldn't be social. High school was very, very hard. The only thing that got me through my freshman year of high school was choir, and I was in orchestra, and I was in an art class. And I had to get special permission to be in all three but that was the only thing that got me through my freshman year. Halfway through sophomore year, I just couldn't do it anymore, so I ended up doing online for the rest of my high school. And at that time, I was very to myself. I was very much a hermit. I was online all the time in like forums and stuff, and I was just very severely depressed, almost suicidal, but not quite, but it was just really terrible. So high school was very, very hard for me. And then after high school, I saw all of my peers just so easily going to college and just moving on with their lives and dating and everything, and I was like, I can't do this. This is really hard for me. And you know, I started learning about my autism and stuff, and that's when I started researching service dogs, and I kind of introduced that a little bit in my intro video. Sorry, I have some notes down here, but I want to talk about, because last time I tried this video, I just completely rambled. So as middle school and high school was just really, really hard for me. So like I said, my meltdowns tend to be kind of just like shutdowns now, and I'm pretty good I've always kind of been pretty good at not having meltdowns in public. I'm kind of able to like repress my meltdowns, and if I have to repress them for too long, that's when I start shutting down. So if I'm in public and I can't get out and go have my meltdown or go to a safe space and get calmed down, that's when I start to shut down. So sometimes I'll be out somewhere and I can't escape the sensory overload and my brain just starts to shut down and I can't help it. And so I will start getting snappy. I'm not a mean person. I used to be when I was a kid. I was completely different when I was a kid, but I'm not a mean person. I'm a very nice person. So if I start getting really snappy and just angry and like feisty, it's probably because that's kind of my fight or flight reaction, and I'm having the fight reaction because I can't flight. I can't get away. So I'll kind of shut down, I'll start to get snappy, and when I start getting snappy with myself, with other people, and with my service dog, that's when I'm like, okay, I need to get out of here and just reset and have my meltdown or have deep pressure or whatever it is to help me get through. I can recall one time in particular, I was singing in a concert at my community college, and it was a very odd concert. We had a violinist, and there was this crazy light show, and there was a drummer, and we were all singing. It was a big choir on big stage. And afterwards, there were several people that were like, hey, we're going out for food. Do you want to come with us? And I was like, no, I should probably go home, because I was starting to feel a little drained, but I didn't realize how drained I was until I got home. And I got home, and I went in my bedroom, and I turned the lights off, and I laid on my bed for like 2 or 3 hours. I could not move. My brain was so drained and so overwhelmed from that concert and whatever went on there that I couldn't move, I couldn't talk, I couldn't eat. I knew I was hungry, but I didn't have the physical or mental energy to get up and actually get food. So it was really bad. So if I am forced to go through something for too long and don't have the opportunity to have that deep pressure therapy help from my service dog or to escape the situation and get calmed down, then I start to completely shut down rather than just having a meltdown. And that really sucks because shutdown takes a lot longer to recover from than just a meltdown, because it's like one level higher. It's gone farther than the meltdown would have for my brain. So a lot of things that I deal with are involving sensory overload. I do have heightened senses. One of the things that you might notice in some of my videos, and I'm going to put this out there right now so that you don't think it's weird or whatever, I do not shave. I don't shave my armpits, I don't shave my legs. And it's been 3 or 4 years that I have not shaved, and I actually enjoy it because the feeling of having clothing or a blanket or anything on my legs with them being smooth and clean shaven is a sensory experience that I do not enjoy. I don't like it. And it's the same thing with my underarms. And so I just don't shave and I'm comfortable with it. And that's another thing that's really important to me is I think gender norms are really dumb. If you are a girl and you don't want to shave, don't shave. That's a cultural thing, and who cares? And you should not look at someone as being dirty or disgusting or uncleanly because they don't shave. That's just silly. So yeah, that's one little thing about me that I'll just mention now. I've always just worn clothes that are comfortable. I don't really care what other people think. I used to wear a lot of boy clothes. I'm very tomboy, so I just wear what's comfortable. And I know a lot of people judge me for that, but I don't care, and you shouldn't judge people for their clothes because it doesn't matter. Whatever makes them comfortable is fine. But anyway, moving on from that, I also experience executive dysfunction, which I mentioned in my intro video. And for me, executive dysfunction means that I have a really hard time with planning and with following through with activities, and just doing things that normal people just find easy to do. For example, I have to set a reminder on my phone or on my calendar to do things like take a shower or eat, or just basic human things that normal people are just like, oh yeah, I should probably do this. There are times when it will be 3 or 4 in the afternoon and I'll start feeling kind of dizzy and shaky, and I'll just think, why am I feeling like this? Oh yeah, I haven't eaten today. Oops. And I recently learned that that's actually something that's that's a common thing with autism, is to just not feel hungry. So there's a lot of times when I just don't feel hungry until the end of the day. And I have to remind myself, oh yeah, my body does need food. I still have to eat even though maybe I'm not feeling hungry. Or sometimes I'll get so focused on a project that I just want to finish it, and I just either feel hungry and don't feel like eating because I need to get done with this project, or I won't feel hungry at all until I'm done with it, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm actually hungry. So the hunger thing is one thing for me. Another thing that I struggle with executive dysfunctioning is just basic hygiene things like showering and brushing my teeth and that kind of thing. I have to have reminders for those. Those aren't things that I just naturally remember to do like most people do. So that's something that's really difficult for me. Executive dysfunction is also having trouble getting started on things and just doing things. So a lot of people will say, oh yeah, I'm a procrastinator, I don't like to start things, but for me it's different. For someone that experiences executive dysfunction, it's not just being lazy and it's not just procrastination. If I have a project that I have to do, like a writing project for school, or even something that I enjoy, like a sewing project. I have a sewing business, I make and sell service dog gear. Even something that I enjoy, like a sewing project like that, can be really hard for me to get started on. Just the thought of this big project, and I know all that's going to go into it, and I know how long it's going to take, and just starting that process is so overwhelming for my brain that I just won't do it. That I'll just say, I can't do it yet, this is too hard, this is too stressful. Once I get started on it, I'm fine. But the getting started is so hard for me that I will sometimes put it off for days or weeks, and then I get closer to a deadline and I'm like, I have to do this, and then it gets even more scary and overwhelming, and it's just this like endless cycle, and it's just really terrible. So it's not just lazy or procrastinating, it's actually something that happens in my brain that says you can't do this because this is too overwhelming and scary and it's too hard and too long to do, so just don't even try. And so that's executive dysfunction for me and how it affects me. I have always had a really hard time holding a job, and you wouldn't think that I would because I'm not as autistic as some other people appear. A lot of people would say, oh, you don't look autistic. Oh, but definitely I am autistic. My first job was I was a balloon twister and face painter at a local party place. I've been doing balloon animals since I was in like 6th grade, just something fun that I really like doing, and it's a really fun hobby. So I started working as a balloon twister and face painter when I was 16 at this local party place. And I was really, really good at making the balloons because that's something I really enjoy doing. But I would just like make my balloon and be in myself and like give it to the kid and then just like make my balloon. You know, I wasn't interacting. And over the years, as I've done balloon twisting at restaurants and birthday parties and stuff now in different ways, I've learned to be more interactive with people. But at the beginning, I had a very hard time interacting with the people as I was doing the balloon because I couldn't physically do 2 things at once. I've tried several different jobs. I was a nurse, not a nurse, but like an at-home care person for a family that has children that have disabilities. And I would just work with the children and work with the other helpers to get them their medication, to like wake them up, to dress them, things like just basic things like that. And I was actually let go from that job because I couldn't interact correctly with the other caregivers. I have been a playground aide at the middle school in our area, and that was really hard for me because I have a really hard time being authoritative, and so I couldn't do that job. Even like being authoritative with elementary students, I couldn't do it. I did work in an elementary special needs classroom for a while. Like I said, that one time I would bring Casey with me because she was still in training, but the principal was very open and welcoming of having her be in class with me. And so I had a really hard time in that situation because I was around a lot of kids that were very loud and kind of rambunctious, and that's just the way that their disability is manifested. And that was overwhelming for me sensory-wise, so I couldn't do that job. I have not tried any kind of retail or food services just because I know that they would be way too overwhelming sensory-wise for me. And like I said, I have tried several different jobs of working with people and I just can't do it. I am currently a dog groomer, and I really, really enjoy that because I don't hardly have to deal with people. I do have to answer phones and make appointments and cancel appointments and talk to people, answer questions that they have about grooming over the phone. It took me about 6 or 7 months of grooming and working at this groom shop. It's just a little mom and pop groom shop, just me and the owner and the bather, and that's it. And it took me 6 or 7 months to even be able to answer the phone because that's something that's always been really hard for me, is talking on the phone. But now I am kind of okay with answering the phone and making phone calls at work, but it's still something that I really struggle with. But dog grooming is something that I'm able to do because I'm able to just work with dogs and not really too much interact with people other than on the phone or just picking up or dropping off a dog. And my boss deals with all the hard people, so that makes it easy. But it's not an easy job physically and mentally. It is very draining and very difficult, but it is a job that I can do because, again, it's with dogs and not people. So yeah, that is kind of basically an overview of autism for me and what it means for me and how it has affected me. It's really frustrating at times to be autistic the way that I am because people don't see me as autistic, they see me as normal, and so they don't understand when I take things literally. They think I'm being rude, or when I don't make eye contact they think I'm being rude and not listening, or things like that. So it can be really hard because people think of autism as the like other area of the spectrum, and so it's hard to kind of understand that you can be autistic and still be verbal and still be communicative and outgoing and all those things. And I am just disabled enough that I couldn't go to college without a service dog. You know, like, I qualify for a service dog because I am disabled enough that my autism affects my everyday life and I can't do things because of it, and my dog helps me to do those things that I can't do by myself. So yeah, that's basically my video about how autism affects me. I'll probably think of more things later and put them into other videos, but I thank you guys for watching, and if you have any questions or comments, please feel free. I would love to try and help anybody that I can through the comments. And so yeah, I thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you later.